2 days after a dust storm tore through the Mesilla Valley, Elias Ward knelt by a splintered fence post, the crimson glow of sunset painting the mesa red. Lila, his 9-year-old daughter, perched on a rock, her dark braids swinging as she scanned the horizon. A wagon limping toward their spring, its wheels wobbling like a drunkard's step. The wagon stopped, and a woman, Clara Hensley, climbed down. Beside her, a boy, Tommy, no older than 10, clung to her hand. Their horse, lame and trembling, snorted softly. Clara's voice, steady despite her weariness, called out, "Just need water, sir. Our mare's done in. We won't trouble you long." Elias studied her, noting the guarded set of her jaw, the way she shielded Tommy. Something in her eyes reminded him of his wife, Mary, gone 3 years to fever. Lila tugged Elias's sleeve. "They look tired, Pa. Can they stay?" Elias hesitated. The Mesilla Valley in 1875 was no place for strangers. Apache trails crisscrossed the hills. Springs like his were gold, fought over by ranchers and railroads alike. "Barn's dry," he said gruffly. "You can bed down for the night. Oats for the horse in the bin." Clara nodded, relief flickering in her eyes. "Much obliged. We're from Texas, running from a banker who stole our land with a forged deed." Her words hung heavy, a warning of trouble trailing her. Lila, undeterred, knelt by Tommy, offering him a pebble from her pocket. "It's smooth, see? Like a river stone." Tommy's shy smile answered, and Lila beamed, seeing in him the brother she'd never had. As Clara and Tommy settled in the barn, Elias lit a lantern, its glow pooling across the hay. The 1870s had seen ranchers lose everything to crooked officials exploiting old Spanish land grants, and Elias's spring was a prime target for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway's water stops. He glanced at Clara, her hand smoothing Tommy's hair, and felt a tug of compassion. "Stay longer if you need," he said, surprising himself. "Trails ain't safe." Clara met his gaze, wary but grateful. "We'll earn our keep." As they spoke, hoofbeats echoed in the distance, sharp under the rising moonlight. Elias's hand tightened on the lantern, his eyes narrowing toward the shadowed mesa. The morning sun rose over the Mesilla Valley, casting long shadows across Elias Ward's ranch as he mended a gate hinge, the creak of iron blending with the spring's steady gurgle. 2 days had passed since Clara Hensley and her son Tommy arrived, their lame horse now stabled and their wagon patched. Lila, Elias's daughter, hummed nearby, tossing grain to the chickens, her eyes darting to Tommy, who watched her with quiet curiosity. The air smelled of damp sage, a faint reprieve from yesterday's dust. Elias's hammer paused as 3 riders approached, their horses kicking up red dirt. The leader, Silas Boone, a slick speculator in a pressed coat, dismounted with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His companions, surveyors for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railway, carried rolled maps and a transit. "Morning, Ward," Boone said, his voice smooth as oil. "We're reassessing land titles for the railroad. Your spring's in a prime spot for a water stop." Elias stood, his broad frame steady, his gaze hard. "My title's clear. Spanish grant, filed proper N, 69. Boone's smile tightened. "Grants get murky. Railroads got needs." Clara, fetching water nearby, froze, her hands tightening on the bucket. She'd heard such talk before in Texas, where a banker's forged deed cost her everything. She stepped closer, her voice low. "He's fishing, Elias. They'll twist papers to claim what's yours." Elias met her eyes, noting the fear beneath her calm, and nodded once. Lila, eavesdropping from the chicken coop, tugged Clara's sleeve. "Don't go, Miss Clara. You and Tommy belong here." Her plea, raw with longing for a mother's warmth, softened Clara's guarded expression. Tommy, exploring the barn, found a carved wooden ring tucked in a feed sack, Elias's handiwork for his late wife, Mary. He showed it to Lila, who clutched it gently. "Pa made it for Ma. She's gone, but it's like she's still here." Tommy's eyes, heavy with his own father's loss, met hers in understanding. Elias, his mind on Boone's words, confided in Clara as they walked to the porch. "Mary loved this land. It's all I've got left of her." Clara's voice softened. "My husband died in a silver mine collapse. This spring, it's your lifeblood, like our farm was." Their shared grief hung between them, a fragile bridge. In the 1870s, railroads like the Atchison used fraudulent surveys to seize land, and Mesilla Springs were battlegrounds for ranchers fighting to hold their claims. Boone, mounting his horse, tossed a surveyor's map to Elias, its red lines slicing through the ranch. "Think on our legal offer, Ward. We'll be back." As the riders vanished into the mesa's haze, Elias's jaw tightened, the map heavy in his hand. The Mesilla Valley woke to a soft dawn, the sun filtering through cottonwoods, casting dappled light across Elias Ward's ranch. 2 days after Silas Boone's visit, the kitchen smelled of warm cornbread, Clara Hensley's hands trembling slightly as she cut slices for breakfast. Her movements were practiced but hesitant, as if she feared wearing out her welcome. Elias sat at the table, his calloused fingers tracing the surveyor's map, its red lines a silent threat to his spring. Lila, eyes bright, passed a plate to Tommy, who grinned shyly, their bond growing like sagebrush after rain. Clara broke the quiet, her voice low. "In Texas, we'd sit like this, telling stories of the stars. Kept us close." Lila leaned in, hungry for connection. "Tell us one, Miss Clara." Clara spoke of Orion, her husband's favorite, her words weaving a thread of memory. Elias, moved by their resilience, cleared his throat. "Clara, you sew? Could use help mending clothes. Earn your keep if you're staying." Her eyes met his, grateful but guarded. "I sew. We'll stay, for now." Outside, Lila led Tommy to the chicken coop, showing him how to scatter feed, their laughter ringing across the mesa. "Chickens like you, Tommy," she said, her voice warm with the sibling-like bond she craved. Tommy, clutching a feather, nodded, his own loneliness easing. The 1870s saw women like Clara often turn to sewing for income on the frontier, especially after losing land to corrupt schemes, a fate Elias feared as Boone's map loomed in his mind. Later, Elias found Clara by the spring, her hands smoothing Tommy's hair. "This place," he said, "it's Mary's memory. Died of fever 3 years back. Spring's all I've got to honor her." Clara's gaze softened. "My Owen went in a silver mine collapse in 73. Left me and Tommy with nothing but debt." The shared weight of loss hung between them, forging a quiet bond. Silver mining boomed in the 1870s, but cave-ins were common, leaving widows like Clara to scrape by in a harsh world. As they returned to the house, Tommy ran up, holding a torn page from Boone's map, found in the barn's hayloft. "It says, relocate the spring," he read, his voice small but sure. Elias's jaw tightened, the words a dagger to his hopes. Clara's eyes narrowed, recognizing the banker's tricks from Texas. "They're planning to choke your water," she warned. The air grew heavy, the mesa's silence broken only by the spring's gurgle, as if it knew its fate was at stake. 3 days after finding the torn map page, Elias Ward and Clara Hensley rode into Mesilla under a sky heavy with the threat of rain. The wagon rattled over the dusty trail, the spring's gurgle fading behind them. Elias's hands gripped the reins, his mind on the surveyor's note about relocating the spring. Clara, beside him, kept her shawl tight, her face set but eyes darting, as if Texas's shadows still trailed her. They sought Mei Chen, a Chinese seamstress known for her sharp mind and steady hand, who ran a small shop near Mesilla's plaza. The air inside smelled of lavender and silk, a sanctuary amid the town's grit. May, a widow whose husband died laying tracks for the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe in 72, examined the torn map page. Her fingers traced the surveyor's seal, her brow furrowing. "This seal's mismatched. Too new for a Spanish grant. It's a forgery like the ones that took my land." Clara's breath caught, her own forged deed in Texas flashing in her mind. "Boone's done this before," she whispered, her voice tight with a moral dilemma. Reveal her past with Boone's schemes and risk exposure, or stay silent to shield Tommy. Elias caught her hesitation, his respect for her courage deepening. Back at the ranch, Lila and Tommy stayed under May's care, sorting thread spools in her shop. Lila shared the wooden ring's story, her voice soft. "Pa carved it for Ma. It's love that stays, Tommy." He nodded, his fingers brushing the ring, their sibling-like bond tightening like a well-tied knot. The 1870s saw Chinese immigrants like May face prejudice, yet they built tight-knit communities, often acting as quiet informants in disputes. Forged surveyor seals were rampant, used by men like Boone to swindle ranchers out of springs, vital for irrigation and railroad water stops. May leaned close, her voice a whisper. "I know a surveyor, Amos, hiding in the Oregon mountains. He can verify this map, but Boone's men are hunting him." Elias's jaw set, his eyes meeting Clara's. "We find him," he said, his tone like iron. Clara nodded, her fear tempered by resolve. As they prepared to leave, the shop's door creaked and a shadow passed outside. Too quick, too deliberate. Clara's hand tightened on Elias's arm. May's eyes narrowed, scanning the street. "Hurry," she urged. "Boone's men are closer than you think." The starlit sky draped the Mesilla Valley in silver, as Elias Ward and Clara Hensley rode back from May Chen's shop, the wagon's wheels crunching over the rocky trail. The mesa's shadows stretched long, hiding unseen eyes in the sagebrush. Elias's hand steadied the reins, his mind on May's warning about Amos, the surveyor hiding from Boone's men. Clara sat silent, her shawl drawn tight, the forged map page burning in her pocket. The air carried the faint scent of wet earth from the spring, a reminder of what was at stake. The 1870s Mesilla Valley was a battleground for water rights, with springs like Elias's contested for irrigation and railroad water stops, often targeted in nighttime raids. At the ranch, Lila greeted them, her eyes wide with worry. "Pa, I heard men in town talking about you," she whispered. "Boone's men, saying they'll persuade you to sell." Clara's face hardened, recognizing the tactics from Texas. "They'll try to scare you out, Elias. I lost my farm to their kind. Forged papers, threats in the dark. Fight them in court, not with fists." Elias's jaw clenched, torn between defiance and the safety of Lila and their new guests. He admired Clara's courage, her voice steady despite her fear, like a flame refusing to flicker. Tommy, sleepless, sat by the spring, sketching its flow with a stick in the dirt. "It's home," he murmured to Lila, who nodded, her hand on his shoulder. Their bond, forged in shared loss, felt like family taking root. Elias watched them, his heart heavy with the fear of losing Lila to the loneliness that had haunted him since Mary's death. Clara's presence, her quiet strength, stirred something in him, a hope he hadn't dared name. As they settled for the night, the wind carried a faint creak, a gate swinging in the distance. Elias's hand froze on the lantern, his eyes narrowing toward the spring. "Stay here," he told Clara, grabbing his rifle from the wall. The 1870s saw ranchers keep nightly vigils against raiders, and Elias moved with the caution of a man who knew the cost of carelessness. Stepping into the dark, he spotted a lantern's flicker near the spring, its glow unnatural against the mesa's black. A figure crouched there, tampering with the water's flow, tools glinting in the moonlight. Elias raised his rifle, his voice low and hard. "Step away or you'll answer for it." The Mesilla Valley lay cloaked in moonlight, the spring's gurgle now a stuttering choke as Elias Ward confronted the figure tampering with its flow. The man, a wiry hired hand of Silas Boone's, froze, his hands clutching a shovel. Tools littered the ground, a crowbar, a length of pipe, gleaming faintly. "I said step away," Elias growled, his rifle steady. The man bolted, scrambling into the sagebrush, leaving behind a scrap of paper caught on a rock. Elias snatched it, the words, "Water stops by week's end," scrawled in hasty ink. His blood ran cold. In the 1870s, railroads needed water stops every 10 to 15 miles, and tampering with springs was a ruthless tactic to force ranchers to sell. Back at the ranch, Clara calmed Tommy, who'd woken trembling from the commotion. "Just a shadow, nothing more," she soothed, though her eyes betrayed her fear. Elias showed her the note, his voice low. "Boone's trying to choke the spring, ruin the land." Clara's jaw tightened, her Texas ordeal flashing back, her farm lost to similar schemes. "It's not just your water," she said. "It's a railroad play. They'll claim the land's worthless without it." Her words cut sharp, her resolve a mirror to Elias's own. Lila, overhearing, tugged Clara's sleeve. "We can guard the spring, Pa!" Like sentries. Her courage, bright as a desert sunrise, stirred Elias. He nodded, his respect for Clara deepening. She was no stranger to fighting for what mattered. "We'll set a watch," he agreed. Clara organized shifts, her hands steady as she handed Lila a lantern. Tommy, clutching the wooden ring Lila had given him, stood taller, their bond tightening like a family forged in fire. The group moved as one, stacking rocks near the spring to slow any intruders, their shared purpose a quiet vow. The 1870s saw ranchers band together against such threats, and Elias felt the weight of their makeshift alliance. Clara's presence, her calm under pressure, reminded him of Mary's compassion, though Clara's fire was her own. As they settled into the first watch, the mesa's silence pressed close, broken only by the spring's faltering flow. Dawn crept over the horizon, painting the valley gold, but Elias's eyes caught something new. Fresh hoofprints circling the ranch, far too many for one man. The tracks wove a tight ring, deliberate and menacing, as if Boone's men had scouted their next move under cover of night. 3 days after the spring's tampering, Elias Ward and Clara Hensley trekked to a canyon shack in the Oregon Mountains, the Mesilla Valley's dawn light fading behind them. The air was sharp with pine and dust, the trail winding through jagged rocks. Elias's boots crunched steadily, his rifle slung low, while Clara's eyes scanned the shadows, her Texas instincts honed for trouble. They sought Amos, May Chen's reclusive surveyor contact, who knew the truth behind Silas Boone's forged map. The 1870s saw Spanish land grants spark legal chaos, with men like Boone bribing officials to redraw boundaries and seize springs vital for ranches and railroads. Amos, a wiry man with sun-creased eyes, greeted them warily, his shack smelling of old paper and kerosene. He studied Boone's torn map page, his finger tracing the mismatched seal. "This is a forgery," he said, voice low. "Uses outdated Spanish grant lines to claim your land, Ward. I've seen Boone's work before. Same trick in Arizona." Clara handed him her Texas deed, her hands steady despite the risk of exposing her past. Amos's eyes widened. "This ties Boone to a network of fraud across territories. He's no small-time crook." Back at the ranch, Lila and Tommy, under May's watchful eye in Mesilla, rummaged through a satchel Boone's men had left in an alley. Inside, they found a ledger listing payments to local officials, its ink fresh and damning. Lila clutched the wooden ring, her voice fierce. "This proves Boone's lying, Tommy. We'll save Pa's spring." Tommy nodded, their bond as strong as the mesa's stone, his sketches of the spring now pinned to the barn wall like a promise. The 1870s saw bribery fuel railroad expansions, with ledgers often the key to unraveling corruption. Elias and Clara shared a glance, their trust growing like roots in dry soil. "We've got evidence," Elias said, "but Boone's men are circling closer." Amos's face darkened. "They're watching your ranch, Ward, planning a final visit to force you out before the courts catch up." His warning hung heavy, the canyon silence amplifying the threat. Clara's hand brushed Elias's arm, her resolve a quiet fire. "We fight smart, not just hard," she said. As they rode back, the mesa loomed, its shadows hiding Boone's men. The spring's gurgle felt fainter, and Elias gripped the ledger, knowing the next move would test their makeshift family. The Mesilla Plaza buzzed under a noon sun, its dusty air thick with the scent of horse sweat and sage. 5 days after finding Boone's ledger, Elias Ward stood in the crowded town hall. A weathered barn turned meeting space, its rafters creaking under the weight of voices. Silas Boone, in a crisp suit, pitched his Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe railway plan to the townsfolk, his silver tongue promising jobs and prosperity. "The railroad needs water," he said, gesturing to a map that carved through Elias's ranch. "Progress demands sacrifice." The crowd murmured, swayed by his charm. In the 1870s, town meetings shaped frontier decisions, and tax auctions often displaced ranchers like Elias to feed railroad greed. Clara Hensley, disguised in May Chen's shawl, slipped into the back, her eyes catching Boone's ally, a corrupt judge named Hargrove, nodding approval from a bench. Elias stepped forward, his voice steady as stone. "That map's a forgery, Boone. Your lines steal my spring with fake Spanish grants." He held up the torn page, its mismatched seal glinting in the lantern light. The crowd wavered, whispers rippling, but Boone's smile didn't falter. "Bold claims, Ward. Where's your proof?" Hargrove's gavel tapped, his eyes narrowing, signaling his allegiance. Lila and Tommy, sneaking in through a side door, overheard Hargrove muttering to a deputy about seizing Elias's ranch via a tax auction. Lila's fingers tightened on Tommy's arm, her whisper fierce. "They're cheating, Pa. We've got the ledger." Tommy nodded, clutching the wooden ring for courage, their bond a spark in the tense air. Clara, spotting them, signaled for silence, her heart torn between protecting them and exposing Boone. The 1870s saw judges like Hargrove exploit tax laws to favor speculators, and Clara knew the stakes from her Texas loss. Elias held his ground, his gaze locking with Boone's. "I've got a surveyor who'll swear your map's a lie." The crowd hushed, sensing the challenge, but Boone's charm held firm, promising wealth to doubters. As the meeting ended, Boone leaned close, his voice a venomous whisper. "Your spring's already mine, Ward." Elias's jaw clenched, the ledger's weight heavy in his pocket. Clara slipped beside him, her presence a quiet anchor. Outside, the plaza's dust swirled, and hoofbeats echoed from the mesa, hinting Boone's men were closing in. The Mesilla Valley's dusk painted the ranch in hues of amber, the spring's gurgle a faint pulse against the mesa's silence. A day after the tense town meeting, Elias Ward sat at the kitchen table, the lamplight casting shadows on Boone's ledger, its pages listing bribes to Judge Hargrove and a railroad executive named Vance. Clara Hensley pored over the entries, her finger tracing inked names, her voice steady as a spring cutting through stone. "These payments tie Boone to Hargrove and the Atchison line. It's enough to expose them." Elias's eyes met hers, torn between storming the judge's office and shielding Lila, Tommy, and Clara from Boone's wrath. Clara's hands paused, her Texas past weighing heavy. "I saw ledgers like this before," she admitted. "Boone's kind ruined us, but I stayed quiet to protect Tommy. I can't now." Elias nodded, her courage calming his storm. "We'll take this to court, but we need allies." Outside, Lila handed Tommy the wooden ring, her voice soft. "It's for courage, like Pa gave Ma. You're my brother now." Tommy's shy smile sealed their bond, as strong as the mesa's roots. In the 1870s, ledgers were key evidence in fraud cases, and women like Clara or informants like May Chen often held the truth towns overlooked. May arrived at dusk, her cart rattling, her face grim. "Boone's men are scouting your ranch, Elias. They're planning to move before the auction." Her warning, sharp as the lavender scent on her clothes, stirred Clara's resolve. "We need that surveyor, Amos, to testify," she said. Elias agreed, his hand brushing the ledger, its pages a map to justice. The 1870s saw Chinese women like May act as quiet informants, their shops safe havens for secrets that could topple corrupt schemes. As they planned, a gunshot cracked from the spring, shattering the evening's calm. Elias grabbed his rifle, Clara's eyes meeting his with unspoken trust. Lila and Tommy froze, their lanterns unlit, the wooden ring glinting in Tommy's hand. May's voice cut through the tension. "They're testing you, Ward. Stay sharp." The mesa loomed, its shadows hiding Boone's men, and the spring's faltering flow echoed the urgency of their fight. Elias stepped toward the door, the ledger's truth heavy in his pocket, knowing the next move could cost them everything. The Mesilla Valley's midnight air hung heavy, the spring's faltering trickle barely audible under a starless sky. Hours after the gunshot's echo, Elias Ward crouched behind a rock near the spring, his rifle cold against his calloused hands. Clara Hensley knelt nearby, her breath steady, a borrowed pistol tucked in her belt. The ranch house, a shadowed outline against the mesa, sheltered Lila and Tommy, guarded by Mei Chen's watchful eye. The ledger, now hidden in a flour tin, held Boone's secrets, but its power meant nothing if the spring fell. In the 1870s, night raids targeted water sources, forcing ranchers to sell or flee. Elias's eyes caught movement, 3 figures creeping along the sagebrush, their boots scuffing softly. Boone's men, armed with shovels and dynamite, aimed to choke the spring for good. Clara's whisper cut through the dark. "They're diverting the flow to dry your land before the auction." Her Texas grit steadied Elias, her presence a reminder of Mary's quiet strength, yet fiercely her own. He nodded, signaling a plan. "Flank them silently. Avoid bloodshed." Inside the house, Lila clutched Tommy's hand, the wooden ring pressed between them. "They won't take our home," she whispered, her voice fierce with a child's defiance. Tommy, sketching the spring's path in the dust, nodded, their bond a shield against fear. May, stationed at the window, murmured, "Stay low. We're family now." Her words, rooted in the 1870s, tight-knit Chinese communities, wove their makeshift kin closer, a bulwark against Boone's greed. Elias crept forward, his boots silent on the earth, Clara mirroring his steps. A twig snapped under a raider's foot, and Elias sprang, tackling the man. The raider's dynamite stick rolled free, its fuse unlit. Clara pinned another, her pistol steady, her voice low. "Drop the shovel." The third fled, hoofbeats fading into the mesa's dark. The scuffle's sounds, grunts, clattering tools, echoed like a warning. Elias tied the men with rope, his heart torn between justice and mercy. "They'll face a judge," he told Clara, who nodded, her eyes reflecting the same moral wrestle. As dawn's first light brushed the valley, the spring's flow held, weak but alive. Clara's hand brushed Elias's, a fleeting anchor, but the mesa's silence broke. A rider's silhouette crested the horizon, carrying a sealed envelope glinting with Hargrove's wax seal. Elias's grip tightened, sensing the auction shadow looming closer. The Mesilla Valley's morning sun burned through the haze, casting stark light over Elias Ward's ranch as he gripped the sealed envelope from Judge Hargrove. 2 days after the night ambush, the spring's flow held, a fragile pulse against the mesa's heat. Clara Hensley stood beside him, her eyes scanning the wax seal, a tax auction notice demanding payment for disputed land taxes by week's end or forfeiture of the ranch. Elias's jaw tightened. The 1870s saw corrupt judges like Hargrove use tax auctions to funnel land to speculators like Silas Boone, starving ranchers of their lifeblood. Inside the kitchen, Lila and Tommy sorted through Mei Chen's satchel, pulling out a letter Amos had sent from his mountain hideout. It detailed Boone's forged Spanish grants, linking Hargrove to a network of bribes. Lila's fingers brushed the wooden ring, her voice fierce. "This proves they're liars, Pa?" Tommy nodded, his sketches of the spring, now a map of their fight, their bond as unyielding as the mesa itself. May, brewing tea, murmured, "Amos will testify. But you must get him to court before Boone's men find him." Her words carried the weight of her own losses to railroad schemes. Clara, her Texas scars raw, spoke softly to Elias. "We've got the ledger and Amos's letter. Confront Hargrove in court, not here." Her resolve, tempered by grief for her lost farm, stirred Elias's hope. Her presence a steady fire. He nodded, his heart torn between protecting Lila and fighting for the spring that held Mary's memory. "We ride to Mesilla tomorrow," he said. "We'll face them on their ground." As they prepared, Clara taught Lila to stitch a patch on Tommy's shirt, their laughter a brief reprieve. "Family's what we choose," Clara said, her eyes meeting Elias's, a quiet vow forming. The 1870s saw frontier women like Clara rebuild lives through small acts, sewing bonds as strong as thread. But as night fell, the mesa's silence shattered. A low rumble echoed, not hoofbeats but the grind of wagon wheels, heavy with intent. Elias grabbed his rifle, Clara at his side, as lanterns flickered near the spring, their glow revealing Boone's men, armed and circling closer, ready to choke the water for good. The Mesilla Valley's twilight wrapped Elias Ward's ranch in a veil of dust and shadow, the spring's weakened trickle a desperate murmur against the mesa's quiet. Hours after spotting Boone's men circling with lanterns, Elias and Clara Hensley crouched behind a low stone wall near the spring, their breaths shallow. Elias's rifle rested steady, its barrel catching the faint starlight, while Clara gripped a shovel, her Texas-honed instincts sharp. The air smelled of sage and menace, the 1870s frontier alive with tales of ranchers defending water against hired guns sent to ruin them. Boone's men, four shadows now, moved with purpose, hauling pipes to divert the spring's flow into a dry gully. Elias whispered, "They aim to starve the ranch before the auction." Clara's eyes, fierce with the memory of her stolen Texas land, met his. "We stop them here, or it's over." Her voice, steady as the spring's pulse, anchored Elias's resolve, her courage a mirror to Mary's yet uniquely her own. They signaled May Chen, watching from the barn with Lila and Tommy, to light a signal fire if more riders approached. Inside the barn, Lila clutched the wooden ring, her whisper to Tommy fierce. "This spring's our home. We fight for it." Tommy nodded, his sketches of the spring's path now a battle plan, their bond as strong as the valley's roots. May, her hands steady, murmured, "Stay sharp, little ones. We're kin now." Her words echoed the 1870s Chinese communities where loyalty held against prejudice and loss. Elias sprang first, tackling a man mid-swing, the pipe clattering to the ground. Clara swung her shovel, knocking another back, her voice sharp. "Back off, or you'll answer to more than us." The others hesitated, spooked by the sudden clash, then fled into the mesa's dark, leaving tools behind. The scuffle's sounds, grunts, metal on stone, faded, but the spring's flow held, fragile but alive. Elias tied the captured man, his heart wrestling compassion against survival. "He'll talk to the sheriff," he told Clara, who nodded, her hand brushing his in a fleeting bond. As dawn crept over the valley, the spring's gurgle strengthened slightly, a defiant pulse. But hoofbeats echoed anew, sharp and deliberate, from the mesa's edge. Clara's eyes narrowed, spotting a rider carrying a court summons, its wax seal glinting with Hargrove's mark, signaling the auction's final hour was near. The Mesilla Valley's dawn broke in a blaze of gold, the spring's faint gurgle a defiant pulse against the mesa's silence. Elias Ward stood firm, his rifle steady, eyes locked on four of Silas Boone's hired guns crowding the spring. Their hands hovered over holsters, the creak of leather slicing through the morning chill. Clara Hensley beside Elias held a shovel like a weapon, her Texas grit shining in her unyielding stance. May Chen, stationed at the ranch house, kept watch over Lila and Tommy, her sharp eyes scanning the horizon for allies. The 1870s saw standoffs like this settle disputes without blood, but the air crackled with the threat of violence, as springs were the lifeblood of ranches and railroads alike. "Back off, Boone's men," Elias called, his voice low but iron-hard. "This spring's mine, and you've no claim." The lead gunman, a scar-faced man named Rawls, sneered, his fingers twitching. "Railroad says different, Ward. Hand it over, or we take it." Clara stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "You're holding a forged map. We've got proof, ledger, bribes, all of it." She pulled Boone's ledger from her satchel, holding it high, its pages glinting in the dawn. The sight wavered two of the men, their eyes darting, loyalty to Boone's coin faltering. Hidden in the sagebrush, Lila and Tommy crouched, their lantern signals flashing toward the mesa. A call for neighbors rallied the day before. Lila's fingers clutched the wooden ring, her whisper fierce to Tommy. "They'll come. We're family now." Tommy nodded, his sketches of the spring a silent vow to protect their home. The 1870s saw communities band against corruption, and their signals were a beacon of hope. Hoofbeats rumbled faintly, neighbors answering the call, their silhouettes cresting the mesa. Rawls' hand edged toward his gun, but Clara's voice cut sharper. "You'll answer to a court, not just us. That ledger names your boss and Judge Hargrove." The words shook the hired guns, their resolve crumbling as hoofbeats grew louder. But the mesa's dust swirled, revealing Hargrove himself, riding in with a posse of 6, his badge glinting under a black hat. "Ward, drop the rifle," he barked, his gavel's echo replaced by a revolver's threat. "Your ranch is auctioned come noon." Elias's jaw tightened, the springs trickle behind him a fragile lifeline, as Hargrove's posse closed in, demanding his surrender. The Mesilla courthouse, a squat adobe building baked by the noon sun, hummed with the murmurs of townsfolk packed shoulder to shoulder. Dust motes danced in the light streaming through narrow windows as Elias Ward stood before the bench, Boone's ledger and the forged map page in his calloused hands. Clara Hensley sat beside him, her eyes steady despite the weight of her Texas past, ready to testify. Lila and Tommy, clutching each other's hands, watched from the back, the wooden ring tucked in Lila's pocket like a talisman. The 1870s saw frontier courts sway to public pressure, and forged documents like Boone's were often the linchpin in unraveling fraud. Judge Hargrove, his face a mask of false authority, leaned forward, gavel poised. Silas Boone, in a crisp suit, stood smugly, his railroad promises still lingering in the crowd's ears. Elias spoke first, his voice like stone. "This map's a lie, Hargrove. Its seals don't match Spanish grants, and this ledger lists your bribes." He slapped the evidence on the table, the ledger's inked names. Hargrove, a railroad man named Vance, drawing gasps. Clara rose, her voice clear. "Boone did this in Texas. Stole my land with forged deeds. He's no stranger to fraud." Her words, raw with loss, stirred the crowd, their murmurs turning sharp. Amos, the reclusive surveyor, took the stand, his sun-creased eyes unflinching. "Boone's map uses outdated grant lines, redrawn to steal Ward's spring." His testimony, backed by years mapping the Mesilla Valley, held weight. Lila, unable to stay silent, stood, her voice trembling but fierce. "That spring's our home Pa's promised to Ma. You can't take it." Her plea, raw with a child's love, hushed the room, neighbors nodding, their trust in Boone eroding. The 1870s saw children's voices sway frontier justice, their innocence cutting through corruption. Hargrove's gavel slammed, his voice sharp. "Enough! This court dismisses wild claims." But the crowd's unrest grew, their shouts drowning his words. Boone, sensing the tide shift, strode forward, a new deed in hand, its wax seal gleaming. "This proves the spring's mine, Ward," he said, his smile venomous. The document's fresh ink and crisp edges sparked doubt, but the crowd's eyes turned to Elias, waiting for his next move. The air thickened, the courthouse creaking under the weight of truth and lies. The Mesilla courthouse buzzed with tension, its adobe walls seeming to lean in as Silas Boone brandished his new deed, its wax seal glinting under the noon light. Elias Ward stood firm, his eyes narrowing at the paper, sensing another lie. Clara Hensley, beside him, gripped the ledger, her Texas scars fueling her resolve. The crowd's murmurs grew sharp, their trust in Boone fraying like old rope. In the 1870s, railroad fraud scandals often unraveled in court when forged documents were exposed, and community pressure could force justice from corrupt judges like Hargrove. Amos, the surveyor, stepped forward, his voice cutting through the din. That deed's a fake. The seal's from a defunct Spanish grant, mismatched by a decade. He pointed to the ink, too fresh for a document claiming years-old rights. Clara rose, her voice steady as the spring's pulse. Boone's done this across territories. Texas, Arizona, now here. His ledger names Hargrove and Vance in a railroad fraud ring. She held up the ledger, its pages listing bribes, a damning map of corruption. The crowd's gasps turned to shouts, neighbors demanding answers. Hargrove's face paled, his gavel trembling as he tried to silence the room. But Lila's voice rang out, clutching the wooden ring. "You can't steal our home!" "It's Pa's promise to Ma." Her words, raw with love, swayed even the doubters, the 1870s frontier valuing family above greed. Tommy, standing beside her, nodded, his sketches of the spring a silent vow. Hargrove, cornered, bolted for the door, his posse scattering as the crowd roared for justice. Elias and Clara shared a glance, their hands brushing, a spark of something deeper kindling, hope, not yet named love. Boone, his charm shattered, spat a vow of revenge before slipping into the crowd, vanishing into the dusty streets. The judge's absence sealed the verdict. The spring was Elias's, the ranch secure. As the crowd cheered, Lila hugged Clara, calling her Ma, while Tommy grinned at Elias, their bond unbreakable as the mesa's stone. The 1870s saw communities triumph when truth prevailed, but as night fell, a shadow lingered, Boone's parting threat echoing like distant hoofbeats, hinting at schemes yet to come. The Mesilla Valley bloomed under a dawn sky, the spring's gurgle steady again, a lifeline threading through Elias Ward's ranch. Days after the courthouse victory, the mesa's sagebrush glowed green, kissed by recent rain. Elias stood by the spring, his calloused hands tracing a wooden fence post, its grain holding memories of Mary. Clara Hensley knelt nearby, planting a garden of sage and yucca, her hands steady in the soil, rooting a new beginning for herself and Tommy. Lila and Tommy laughed nearby, tossing pebbles into the spring, their sibling-like bond as strong as the valley's stone. The 1870s saw frontier families blend through necessity, forging kin from shared trials. In the kitchen, Elias set the wooden ring on the table, its simple carving a promise of honest love. "Clara, Tommy," he said, his voice low but warm. "Stay. This ranch is yours too, if you'll have it." Clara's eyes glistened, her Texas losses fading in the light of this offer. "We'll stay," she whispered, her hand brushing Elias's, a vow of family, not yet romance. Lila hugged Clara, her voice soft. "You're Ma now." Tommy, grinning, called Elias Pa, the word a bridge over their grief. The moment felt like a fire kindled from ashes, their chosen family a testament to healing. May Chen arrived, her cart laden with food for a town feast, a tradition in the 1870s to mark victories over corruption. Neighbors gathered, their laughter echoing across the mesa, the spring's flow a symbol of their shared triumph. May, her lavender-scented shawl fluttering, toasted Elias and Clara, her own losses to railroad schemes softened by this community's strength. "You've built more than a ranch," she said, her eyes bright. The feast's warmth, with cornbread and shared stories, wove their bonds tighter, the valley alive with hope. As the sun set, painting the mesa crimson, Elias and Clara stood by the spring, their hands close but not touching, a quiet promise growing. The ranch, once a shadow of loss, now pulsed with life. But as the crowd dispersed, a rider delivered a letter from Las Cruces, its wax seal unbroken, the words inside hinting at Silas Boone's next scheme, lurking beyond the horizon. The Mesilla Valley woke to a soft dawn, the spring's steady gurgle weaving through Elias Ward's ranch like a heartbeat. Weeks after the feast, the mesa bloomed with new life. Clara's garden flourished, its sage and yucca a testament to roots taking hold. Elias mended a gate, his hammer's rhythm blending with Lila's laughter as she and Tommy chased chickens, their bond as unyielding as the valley's stone. Clara, sewing patches on Tommy's shirt, smiled, her Texas scars fading in the warmth of this chosen family. The 1870s saw frontier families rebuild from loss, their shared work a vow stronger than blood. Elias paused, his eyes on the spring, reflecting on Mary's memory now joined by new hope. Clara's courage, her steady hands in crisis, had rekindled his heart, not as a replacement but a new chapter. He carved a small wooden ring for Lila, mirroring the one for Mary, a symbol of love enduring. "This place," he told Clara, "it's ours now, yours, mine, the kids." Clara nodded, her voice soft. "We're home, Elias." Lila hugged Tommy, calling him brother, while he sketched the spring, its flow a promise kept. The letter from Las Cruces, warning of Boone's schemes, lay unopened on the table. Elias set it aside, choosing this moment of peace. The ranch, once shadowed by grief, now glowed with laughter, the spring's rhythm a lifeline for their future. Mei Chen visited, her lavender scent a reminder of their shared fight, her smile affirming their triumph. The 1870s saw communities heal through unity, and this ranch was their victory, built from broken pieces, forged by compassion and courage. Analysis and transformational message. The wooden ring symbolizes honest love, carrying Mary's memory into a new family's promise. The spring, a lifeblood for the ranch, reflects community's resilience against greed. Boone's forged map, undone by truth, shows that courage reveals deceit. This story celebrates family by choice, proving that healing from loss comes through shared struggles and second chances, urging us to build hope from hardship